So Transform 2019 is about decisive moments for people who are transversing, leading, and providing healthcare. What does that mean? So French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson used the phrase decisive moments applied to photography in 1952. That's one of his photographs that you'll see in a moment, I hope. He wrote, "To me, photography is the simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of the significance of an event as well as of a precise organization of forms which give that event its proper expression." Well, that phrase could apply to more than just art, couldn't it? What are your decisive moments as you think about how you entered healthcare and moved through it? Are there things that you recognized in a fraction of a second along the way? I think about my nearly accidental entry into healthcare as a career in 2003. I think about my first nearly quixotic moment trying to change healthcare in 2006. I think about my entry into healthcare as a patient in a new and significant way. Last year, I was diagnosed with a serious cancer. As part of that approach, as I entered into my cancer experience, it felt very much like this moment frozen in time, like this man suspended in air. What was going to happen when he landed in the water? I know every cancer journey is different, and I can just tell my story. Here's what it has been so far. As Tom said, I'm a chief information officer, so my life is full of nothing but bad news, real or imagined crises, seemingly unsolvable problems. So honestly, when I first was diagnosed with cancer, when I sat in my PCP's office and she said, "I'm sorry, it's cancer," I was focused on a third-person response. I was trying to solve that guy's cancer over there. And of course, it became obvious over time that this was really about me. I had tests done that determined over the next few days that my cancer was stage 3, that it was locally advanced, which I learned to means really big, and might involve some other organ systems. And yet, my care team's plan was to cure me. So, over the next couple of days, I arranged my medical leave and turned over my duties to someone else. I had a port put in my chest for chemotherapy. That really brought it home. And then radiation therapy and surgery were to follow that event. So, I know that, again, that everyone has a different expression of what this is like. But for me, this moment of hanging in time, of what comes next, was a decisive moment for me. But then the next moment dawned more slowly, like a sunrise, as opposed to a lightning strike of a cancer diagnosis. A really good friend of mine has a daughter who survived cancer twice, leukemia, as a toddler and then as a kindergartner. There's a picture of her in a characteristic victory pose midway through her second treatment. Her mom, my friend, said to me long before I was diagnosed with cancer, "Look for the gift of cancer because it can transform you." Now, what a strange and paradoxical idea is that somehow cancer could provide a gift. And yet I was confident in my care team. I believed them when they said I could be cured. And so with curiosity, I began to look at what could be the gifts of my cancer journey. And then as I began to start chemotherapy and take some initial steps and understand what it was all about, it felt imperative to me that I had to figure out what the gifts were of my cancer. And so I began to look for them. Gift 1. I decided to let cancer teach me how to be a better CIO. It would be an unparalleled opportunity for me to observe healthcare as a patient from the inside. I hope that it would give me a better sense of insight and empathy about the clinicians that I support and the patients that we treat, my fellow travelers through this journey through healthcare. And I was being treated for cancer at the same time that Mayo was finishing a multi-year, huge program to change out all of our clinical systems and put in place a new EHR. and I'd have a chance to see that from the inside. The second gift that I was interested in exploring was, how could I pay things forward? I signed up for every clinical study I could sign up for. There was 3 that were presented to me because I believe in the next generation of medical discovery. Data is going to drive more cures, and I want to share my data to provide something for someone else. There's other ways that I still want to pay it forward for from my cancer treatment. I'm not sure exactly what those are going to be, but I'm still curious about them. The third gift was the opportunity to frankly assess my life. Right now, I'm in remission. I'm cancer-free. Although coincidentally, later today, I'm going to have my first CT scans post-surgery to see if the cancer has returned. But cancer really shattered my sense of immortality and invincibility that maybe we carry around until we come to an experience like that. And what I was able to discover is, honestly, I really don't want to just give it up and sail away to Tahiti. Although some days as a CIO, it's a little tempting. What I really want to do is to spend the next stage of my career trying to make impossible things happen. So look, there are many journeys through cancer. I can only be true to my own, but a part of it also is understanding what gifts come to us that are unexpected, maybe a surprise. One for me was a bunch of people thought maybe I'd die. So they reached out to me to share a little bit about their connection to me and our relationship with each other. And it was really remarkable. In some ways, it was like hearing the kinds of things you might hear at your funeral. How many of us have a chance to hear in advance that maybe the pebble of our life dropped into a pond has ripples that will affect other people? Then there's the gifts that we give back. It is my privilege to serve Mayo Clinic and the patients that we serve together. It's been a privilege to be part of a journey through care and to understand what's going on. It's a privilege for me to have a chance to speak to you this morning, even though I'm really uncomfortable speaking about myself. Maybe there's a way to create a moment of pause and reflection in our otherwise hyper-disciplined and uber-organized lives. So, I'm sure there are other cancer survivors and maybe cancer patients here in the audience. I know there are people here who have faced a significant illness either for themselves, their friends and family, or maybe for the patients that they treat. All of us have a different story. All of us have different kinds of decisive moments. What were yours? I know there's innovators here and pioneers who are trying to drive the next generation of cures and care. What was your decisive moment that caused you to take the leap, to take a chance, to do something different that someone else hasn't done before? So, I hope that here at Transform, there'll be an opportunity for some of this event to illuminate decisive moments. And maybe some people might find a decisive moment in their time here. Regardless, I hope that this conference is very useful to all of you. I hope we can all find a decisive journey, decisive moments. I wish you health and success in whatever professional and personal journeys you are on. I hope you can find your gifts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris.
You bet, Tom. Thank you.
So it's interesting to hear your conversation because in some ways, for as many decisive moments as you've had, you might actually have another one this week with the results of your test.
We'll see how it goes.
And in some ways, you haven't had yet the decisive moment that talks about what you want your cancer to mean. What's your cancer story?
Right, right. You know, I'm not sure you get to choose your own story. Maybe it gets thrust on you. I'm not sure. I'm trying to be as curious as I can about what's ahead and to learn from other people along the way.
So what is, now that you've been a patient, right, and the CIO, can you recount a decision that was made differently or a plan you implemented differently now because you've been a patient as well?
Well, one thing I'd like to see is we're focused a lot, inappropriately so, on creating a better digital front door. How can we let people have a human experience regardless of what method they come through? A traditional way where they visit us physically, or maybe a virtual way in which they visit us digitally. But I'm also convinced that we need to have a digital backdoor. My experience of leaving care and leaving the hospital felt sometimes as though I was suspended in midair. I was looking for more resources. I was looking for more information.
As
I left care. Yeah, especially as I left hospitalization. What do I think about aftercare? A lot of information was shared with me, and I had a companion, my girlfriend, who was also a doctor, along with me, who could listen. So I heard a lot, but there was a lot I missed, And it would have been helpful to have reminders about what does my aftercare plan look like and what should I expect.
I had to have my car towed the other day, and it was through text, and afterwards they said, rate 1 through 5, how was the service? I mean, it seems like you're wanting a little more than a 1 through 5 text after you've left that care.
Yeah, exactly, and hopefully experience is better than being towed.
What about data? We're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow
with
a big project that Mayo is doing with Google, but it's also interesting because, and we'll open this up a little more tomorrow, but you want your data out there.
Yeah, I do. I want my data to be kept private. I'm a little unusual, so my sense of privacy is probably a little bit lower than maybe some other people are. I want my data to be private, but I'm pretty convinced that putting my data together with other cancer patient data in a way that's de-identified is a viable and important way to advance medical care. And we've been doing that for decades. It's just now we can do it at hyperscale with more data from more places with more power.
If we've been doing it for decades, and again, we'll dive into this more tomorrow with a representative from Google, but if we've been doing that for a decade, harvesting this data to figure out ways to treat, why is it such a political, maybe not even political, but just moral push point for us? Oh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure I don't want you to have all my data.
Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable. To be, as candid as possible, I think there have been some actors, not in healthcare so much, but in other spaces that have not treated people's data with integrity, right? And you think about the Cambridge Analytica thing with Facebook, for example. Everything that was done there was, quote, legal, and was allowed under the checkoff box that each of us checked off when we became a Facebook member. That's miles away from the highly regulated environment of healthcare. So I wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that that was what happens in healthcare. But we have to go the extra mile, stand extra tall, be extra sure around how we treat that data with integrity. And I think that it is not two poles. I think we can keep private data private, and I think more data drives more cures, and we can do both simultaneously. It's not a trade-off. It's an and, not an or.
Are you nervous for today?
For my
CAT scan?
If I told you no, would that sound like fake bravado? I had such confidence in my surgical team in the end. One of the things that we do here that's pretty miraculous is we do this thing while you're in surgery, a frozen section, where we do the pathology to determine where the margin of the cancer is clear. And they were very clear that I had these big, wide, clear margins, and they said that the chemotherapy had shrunk my cancer, so I'm optimistic.
Well, thank you very much. Chris Ross from Mayo Clinic, you're the CIO.